eating at some shawarma place yesterday, and there's a guy like sitting next to me, and it just like started to make me feel more confident. I wouldn't have done that before.
Okay, what are our 5 questions?
What's the connection between melukat and Hanukkah?
Hanukkah and Sukkot.
Then,
8.
yeah.
I get to do one too. What's the next one?
Why are they 8 days?
Okay, right, that was 8, right?
The 2 different avodot, like the mizbeach and the...
Okay, that's number 4, that's true. What's number 3?
Why are there 8 candles in Hanukkah? There were
Right.
7 on the menorah.
We're celebrating, or commemorating a miracle that happened with a 7-branch menorah with an 8-branch menorah. Why is that? One more question.
Why we light at sunset?
Time, right, Biddy? Why do we light when we light? Okay, those are the 5 questions, and we've answered 2 of them. Why do we light at sunset? What's the whole meaning of Hanukkah?
To light up the dark.
To light up the dark. And why are they both 8? Well, why is Hanukkah 8? We don't know why Sukkot is 8. We'll find that out also. Why is it 8? L'mayla min teva, and that's the what, that door is not hard to open. Okay. Just one annoying fact: we don't eat in Chassidus shiur. Okay, so you can put it in front of you and do his coffee the whole time. Drink, no problem. Alcohol, coffee, whatever you want. But we don't eat rugalach in Chassidus shiur. It's just one of the rules. In mine, not and Rabbi Levinger, he puts out cake, but so just no problem.
Okay.
It's free. Just put it down and don't eat it. That's all. You'll eat it after, or you can eat it really fast right now.
I'll eat it really fast because it's warm, and then I'll.
Okay, right. That's exactly why. No, you can sit and eat it here, but that's exactly why we don't let eating, because it's people think about the rugala, not chassidus. So fast, sit down, eat it up,
All right.
swallow it up, and
It's only meant for fuel.
okay.
Only meant for.
Yeah, I know. That's why you care that you want. That's why you care that you want to eat it while it's hot. I understand, because it's better fuel when it's hot. I get it.
Oh, it's better fuel. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Right. You want to buy a bridge? Okay. So we learned ois beis, and in ois beis we realized that our 2 of our questions were answered. The koyach to illuminate the dark comes from a level beyond the natural order, because after all, within the context of the natural order, that darkness is able to exist. So there must be a level of light beyond that penetrates it and illuminates it. Okay, yafeh. Ubir inyan b'avedas ha'adam. So now, then we started in Ois Gimel. We started talking about the fact that the inyan of the Greeks was a ruchniistika war, a spiritual battle. What were they interested in? They were not interested in us not learning Torah and not doing mitzvahs per se. They were interested in us learning Torah, but not relating to the Torah as Torah secho. It's the Eberster's Torah, and now we'll see relative to mitzvahs, right? But that's what we saw yesterday in Ois Gimel, right? Because it says in Alanisim, which we will say a few more times, right? It's always hard when it ends, Hanukkah. Lashkicham terasecho ulavira michuke ritzenecho. Lashkicham terasecho. That was the emphasis of the Rebbe in the Maimer. To forget your Torah, not to forget the Torah. You want to learn the Torah, memorize the Torah, and write a PhD in the Torah? No problem. But as long as you don't relate to the godliness of it. Okay. So we are, I'll count down, even though up is shorter. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9th line down, there's a period. It's about 6 lines up if you don't count the last line, which is a half a line, right? Similarly, relative to mitzvahs. Just like their battle was a spiritual battle against the learning of Torah, and they weren't upset with us learning Torah. They simply wanted us to learn Torah for the intellect of it and not the godliness of it. Al derech zeh b'mitzvahs, so too relative to mitzvahs. Sh'milchamas ha'Yavanim haisa neged elokush b'mitzvahs. That the war of the Yavanim was against the godliness of mitzvahs. Masha mitzvah sem ritzenu yisbarach. That which the mitzvah is, the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you want to tell me that you belong to a certain, you don't have a copy, Tzvi? I'm sorry. Eat that fast. You're not eating fast enough. Come on, put it in there and be done with it.
You can't give it to him until he's finished.
No, you can have it. I didn't know. I'm
That was
sorry.
good timing. I finished.
There you go. Yeah, we didn't want to get chocolate all over your mimer.
Can I ask a quick question? Al Anisim, who wrote Al Anisim? We were having a debate about this yesterday. Was it Anshe Knesset HaGedolah?
Probably
But did they exist at this time?
after. They came after. Right? Most of our davening.
They came after this
The
period?
Anshe Knesset is a good day. I'm sorry. No, I take it back.
Because Shimon
The
I
Anshe
think
Knesset, I
between
take
the-
it back. I'm sorry. The Anshe Knesset Gedela are before. Mordechai was one of the Anshe Knesset. The Anshe Knesset Gedela are in between Bias Rishon and Bias Sheni.
right.
So who added Al Anisim? Some Rabbanan. How did it slip in there? I don't know.
Interesting.
Don't know. But there was a whole question as to whether there would be a holiday. Right? It wasn't until the next year that they celebrated the holiday. Right? Similar to Hey Davis, which is a big holiday this week in Lubavitch. So there was no sign whatsoever from the Rebbe that there was going to be any celebration of that the next year. The Bachman did it.
And he approved it.
The Mazkirim were trying to get the Bachman to stop. They put up a big sign in 770, Hey Davis, the big day, right? For that the next year it fell out on Shabbos. So that was going to Farbrengen anyway. And so usually the Rebbe would Farbrengen. So they put up a big sign. The Mazkirim tried to get it down. And bottom line, the Rebbe in the Farbrengen said, well, I see from the sign that there's a big celebration today. And then he talked about it and made it a yom. Absolutely. Right? But it was the Bachrim who did it. The Rebbe had not talked about any commemoration of it at all, which is interesting. I mean, it was a very painful thing for the Rebbe. The victory was very sweet, but the event, everything that went on was extremely painful. Okay, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, Hey Davis, so you'll find out there'll be a Farbrengen this Thursday night. There's about the Shem, there'll be a Farbrengen. Okay. What do you want to take out of mitzvahs? You want to do mitzvahs because it's somehow there's certain behavior patterns that connect you culturally to this group of people. No problem. No problem. That's Greek. Greeks have no problem with that. There are streams of Judaism that relate to mitzvahs that way. Right? They're Greek. Right? They've been very powerfully affected by the Greek mentality, which is just the Western world as we know it, because the Greeks won in terms of creating a certain way of understanding reality, which we'll see in Oishei very clearly. Right? So in that sense, they didn't beat us, but they took over the world, and it's still very powerfully affected by Greek ideals. Right? So the idea of doing a mitzvah, no problem. You want to do certain actions that you have in common with other people of your cultural group, no problem whatsoever. You want to celebrate certain events that happened in history. Everybody, we talked about that yesterday. Everybody does that. Guy Fawkes Day, Bastille Day, those are the ones we mentioned. Independence Day in America, Canada Day. Oh, that's a
Thanksgiving's
big
a good
day.
example.
Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving, right? Okay.
Halloween.
Okay, good. We're okay, right? Right? So I'll tell the jokes. Mine are better. So everybody does that. What's unique about us? That we don't relate to celebrating those days as celebrating something that happened in history. Hanukkah, the energy of Hanukkah that happened 2,200 and whatever years ago it was, that energy exists now in the 8 days of Hanukkah. The energy of Purim, it says, we learn this from Purim, Niskarim v'nasim, they're remembered and done. The energy of Yetzias Mitzrayim is revitalized and comes into the world in a revealed state on the 15th of Nisan every year. Do we tap into that as much as we could? Certainly not as much as we could. Do we tap into that a little bit? I hope so. Right? It's not that we're commemorating a moment in history. That moment in history is happening again. Time is a cycle. Time is not linear. Time is circular. Keeps coming back on itself. Right? So Sunday happens all the time. You and I call it Yom Rishon. Right? There's no Yom Shmini yet. Right? There's just the same 7 days. circling around, right? Okay. What happens every Shabbos? The energy of the first Shabbos is revealed on every Shabbos. The energy of Pesach is revealed on every Pesach. That the Greek can't handle. What are you talking about? You want to talk about something that happened Pesach 3300, and this will be what? The 3338th anniversary of Pesach this year, right? Okay. Pesach happened in the year 2448 of the creation of the world. Avram Avinu was born in the year 1948. Yitzhak Avinu was born in the year 2048. Avram was told, you'll be a stranger in a land not yours for 400 years, which means that we wouldn't be in Eretz Yisrael. That took another 40 years because we messed around in the desert. But we got out of Egypt 400 years after that. That was 2448. We got the Torah that year. We got into Eretz Yisrael in the year 2488 in the month of Nisan. Right? Okay, so that event that happened 3,300 and it will be 38 years ago, this Pesach, that event is recreated and happening again on Pesach. That's what Pesach means. That's what Hanukkah means. That's what Purim means. That's what all the holidays mean. Sukkot doesn't have a date. Shavuos, getting the Torah again. Okay, so the Greek can't relate to that. If you want to commemorate these days, fine, okay, but it happened a long time ago and has nothing to do with you. It does have something to do with us. Matter of fact, it's happening again. And that the Greek has a hard time with. Masha mitzvah sem ritzoni is baruch. And the very fact that any mitzvah, we say it connects us to the Eibishter and it's the Ratzon of the Eibishter. You want to say that you're doing this because you have interesting cultural patterns. You want to call, why do you eat kosher food? You eat kosher food in order to maintain a connection to yourself and have some sort of cultural eating habits, and French people eat this food, and Italian people eat this food, and Jewish people eat this food. Okay, we say to it, that's fine. You want to tell me that you're doing that because the Eibusha told you to? Bah humbug, they would say, which I don't think has anything to do with us, but whatever. So now the Rebbe makes the deal that we had talked about before, and that's why we say in davening, laviram, to move them away michukei ritzei necho. The choikim, a choik is a law that doesn't penetrate our intellect. We'll talk about that. The Rebbe is going to talk about that at great length in Ois Daled. It's one of the things this mimer is famous for, and that it has nothing to do with Hanukkah. It just has to do with what mitzvahs are all about. Right? Because what's a choik? So a choik is a mitzvah that doesn't resonate in human intellect. Right? What's an example of a choik? Kashrus.
Red
Right?
heifer. Red heifer.
Red heifer is the ultimate choik. Zeis kukas, right? Shatnez, right?
Yeah.
Wool and linen. Okay, so there's a number of chukim. Fine, but why do we do them? God said so. They make sense. You're going to be able to figure out in the laboratory why wool and linen together is not a good idea? No, you won't be able to figure that out. Right? Does that mean it's not a good idea? For a few million people amongst the 8 billion people in the world, it's not a good idea. For the other people, no problem whatsoever. Right? Milk and meat, it's only a problem. It's a serious, serious problem. It's unbelievably unhealthy for a Jew to eat milk and meat together. Unbelievably unhealthy for that Jew. There's 8 billion people for whom it's absolutely innocuous. Probably tasty. Cheeseburgers, I think they like them, right? Okay. Jews, poison. Pashut poison. How's that work? Doesn't work rationally. Okay. Those are chukim. So that the Greek can't relate to. That bothers the Greek. You want to have laws of finance? Everybody has laws of finance. You want to have a law, don't murder? Everybody has laws, don't murder. Yeah, whether they listen or don't listen, that's a separate issue. But every government has a law about, and the Russians have a law, you're not allowed to murder. Who is allowed to murder? The government's allowed to murder whoever they want. But no one else is allowed to murder. Okay. Everybody has that. What are those laws called? Mishpatim. Chukei dafka, chukim, and ritzei necho dafka, specifically ratzon, as opposed to intellect. Will, which is beyond intellect. The Shnei Perushim B'zeh. Now the Rebbe explains this in 2 different ways. And it's the second way that we're going to spend quite a bit of time trying to understand. Sh'ala mitzvahs to Eidos, u'mishpatim. Regarding the mitzvahs of Eidos and mishpatim. What are Eidos? Pesach. Right? Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Holidays that relate as testimonials to particular events in history. Those are called Eidos. Shalom mitzvahs te'edis umishpatim, and what are mishpatim? Mishpatim are those laws that we would do anyway, even if the Torah didn't tell us. Right? I mean, there would be laws against theft. We'd figure that out. Most humans figure that out. Right? Since these are intellectual mitzvahs, these are mitzvahs that resonate in human intellect. Right? Again, everybody has days that commemorate events that happened in their history. Hiskimu gam Yavanim. The Yavanim agreed with that. No problem. V'kol milchamtam haisa keneged mitzvahs dechukim. That their milchama was against chukei ritzenecha. The chukim, those laws that don't resonate in intellect, mikevin she'ofen kiyumam, because the way of performing those laws, who rak mibnei shem ratzon avaya, is only because they're ratzon avaya. Why are you doing this? Because the Eibusher said so. Right? Why aren't you eating milk and meat? God said, don't eat milk and meat. Why? I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. Right? Okay. That, the Greek breaks out in hives when you explain that to him. Tell him that. Right? You don't really explain it. Right? A famous line in American literature. Shut up, he explained. Okay, that's a chayk. Just, why do you do it? Because God said so. You understand it? No. Have you ever noticed in Elam Hazard, there's a few things you don't understand? Right? And guess what? It's not your job to understand them. It's not who you are. You're not in charge. There's things we don't have any understanding of, and it's not our job to understand them. And if you spend your time trying to understand it, you'll just spin your wheels, trying to get out of snow. Press on the gas more. What does that do? Right? It just makes it worse.
I just work here.
Right? What?
I just work here.
Right? Spinning around. Okay.
People call that blind faith.
What?
Just doing something that we don't understand because Hashem says.
It might be blind faith. I don't think it's so blind, but it's faith. It's what
People
Amunah is.
that don't understand what we do.
It's true. I mean, it might be considered. It might be considered something that statement might be pejorative, right? Could be, might not be. Right? Okay. I think the blind part is the pejorative part of it, right? What's Amunah? Amunah is a power in your soul that allows you to connect to levels of reality that are beyond intellect. Right? You don't have to acquire Amunah. You have it. Every single Jewish soul has the power of Amunah. Just like you don't have to acquire intellect. Every single Jewish soul, every soul in the world, B'chlal, has a power of intellect. You don't have to do anything to have intellect. You have a power of intellect. You don't have to do anything to see. You have a power of sight that exists in your soul and is clothed in your body, works with this vessel called the eye and the optical nerves that connect to the optical center of the brain, and you see. Well, you don't have to do anything to do that. It's just the power of the soul. When the soul leaves the body, the power of sight leaves the body, so you don't see anymore because sight doesn't come from eyes. Eyes are simply the vessel that allow for the power of sight of the soul to express itself in a physical way. Right? So to speech, so to hearing, so to movement. Okay, there's another power of the soul that isn't clothed in the body. Right? Well, just to give you an example of a power of soul that's not clothed in the body, Ratzon, will, isn't clothed in the body. It powers everything in the body equally. But you can't say where the will is in the body. I can tell you very, very clearly where sight is in my body. It's in there and the things that are connected to that thing. I can tell you very, very clearly where intellect is, and it's in that gray matter in behind this skull. Right? Where's hearing happening? In here. Where's speech happening? Here. Where's movement happening? Here. Where's will happening? All of them equally. The reason I'm speaking is because I want to. The reason I'm seeing is because I want to. The reason I'm smelling is because I want to. Now I don't want to. Everything is equally an expression of will. And so will is what's called a koyach makif, an all-surrounding and encompassing power. It's not clothed in the body. It powers everything in the body equally. Right? Also your intellect. Why are you thinking about something? Because you want to. You don't want to think about it. Stop thinking about it. Hard to do, but you can do it. Just replace it with something else. It'll come back. Okay, get rid of it again. You can do that. Okay. What's another example of an all-encompassing power? Well, pleasure also, but the one we're talking about, Emunah. Emunah is a power of the soul. Jewish soul has this power called Emunah. Am I conscious of it? Might not be. Am I conscious of every will I have? No. There's certain aspects of my subconscious will that I'm not aware of. I might act in accordance with it, but I'm not aware of that will. And if I'm acting in a way that's destructive, I might have to go to someone who's a professional and he'll help me uncover those parts of my subconscious will that are driving this behavior that I, at this point, have no control over because I don't know where it's coming from. If I develop a certain appreciation of where it's coming from, which a good psychologist can help me do, right? A bad one will kill me, a good one will help me, right? So then I'll come and be more in touch with my subconscious will. Oh, okay, that's real. Meaning more of my will come into my conscious reality. I'll be aware of it. Oh, so how about my emunah? Am I aware of my emunah? If I am, so then I'm a person who lives godliness in their life. If I'm not, so then I won't live godliness in my life. Right? But is it there? It's there. Right? Can the Greek understand what I just said? He can understand it intellectually. He just doesn't believe in it.
Isn't Emunah somehow connected to the hidden love?
Yeah, Beseder, but there's a power called emunah. I mean, Hava Mesuteres is something else that do that. Hava Mesuteres is an emotion that comes as a result of that intense connection to the Eibishter, but the intense connection to the Eibishter is ultimately resultant from the fact that from that power of the soul called emunah, that makif called emunah. Hopefully it'll express itself. If it expresses itself, we love God, fear God, do mitzvahs, like Jews. Right? We're like really healthy people. If we can bring that super conscious part of us into conscious reality. Right? But the Greek can't relate to anything what I just said. Can't relate to it at all. Right? The Greek will say that unless it makes sense, there's no reason to do it. The Jew appreciates the fact that that's an absolutely absurd statement. Kidneys don't make sense. Ashkenazim still don't eat kidneys on Pesach. I once had a conversation with a religious psychologist who said an incredibly brilliant person and an unbelievably good psychologist. Right? I once had a couple that I was dealing with, and I phoned them up and said, "Will you meet with them?" He said, "Okay, tell me the story." So I told him the story. He said, "Okay, I'll meet with them, but I'm setting the meeting at 7 in the morning." I said, "Well, why are you doing that?" He said, "Well, because I cost a lot of money, and I don't think they really want to come. And so I don't think they're going to show up, and I think they'll be divorced within 2 or 3 weeks based on what you just described. But
It's crazy.
I'm more than happy to see them. But I'm telling you right now, they're not going to come. So I don't want to take their money. It's $100 a lot of money. This was 30 years ago. There's a lot more money in this country than it is now. Mm-hmm. So they had an appointment, and they didn't show, and they were divorced within 2 or 3 weeks. He never met them. I just told him the story. He said, this is what's going to happen. He was unbelievable. But he said one of the stupidest things I've ever heard anybody say. I don't do anything I don't understand. What a stupid thing to say. So then I asked him, I said, well, hold on. He's an Ashkenazi. He's from. Right? Do you eat kidneys on Pesach? So he said, okay, there's that. We do all sorts of things we don't understand, right? Otherwise, we don't do anything. But the Greek will try to convince us that we understand. Even though the Greek will appreciate subliminal advertising. The Greeks figured that one out, meaning Greek society, Western society figured out subliminal, which is now illegal, right? But when television first started, so they realized that they could buy about 1/16 of a second of time for an advertisement and flash a bottle of Coca-Cola with the water dripping down the outside of it that makes it look very, very tasty. You didn't even see it. But generally, people would get up out of their chair and go to the fridge and get a Coke. It's called subliminal advertising, which they outlawed because it's very, it's really.
It's been replaced by algorithms.
They do now. They got that. Okay, but that what's that all about? It's all about an aspect of you and I which is not fully conscious, not part of our conscious intellectual reality. that affects us very powerfully, right? Where's it coming from? I'm not sure. Okay. Psychology b'chlal. It's based on the fact there's this thing beyond intellect in us. Now, the psychologist who doesn't believe in that will call it below intellect. Okay, so 100%. The psychologist usually uses the word subconscious. You and I might also use the word superconscious, beyond conscious. Right? Uperisha beis. So what's the first thing? First thing, the Greeks wanted to take us away from chukim. Eidus mishpatim, no problem. The second understanding of it all, deeper. That which they wanted to move us away, all mitzvahs. Gam mitzvahs to Eidus mishpatim, including Eidus and mishpatim. Now, what's that all about? Now the Rebbe is going to explain something absolutely fundamental in understanding mitzvahs. It's amazing. One paragraph, Daled. V'yuven ze al pia yedua. This is explained based on that which is well known. Now, it's always annoying when the Rebbe says that because I might not know it, and then I feel somewhat insignificant because why don't I know this? Okay, Beseder, so I don't know it yet, but I guess I will once I learn this paragraph. The Rebbe is simply pointing to the fact that there are other Maimarim of the other Rebbeim, specifically the Frierdiker Rebbe, that discuss this. Shegam ha-mitzvahs de Eidus u'mishpatim. Also the mitzvahs of Eidus and Mishpatim. And now what you're going to read in this line is not a chiddush at all. Everybody will say this. Tzarich l'kayim. One must fulfill those mitzvahs. Be'ikr, essentially, mibnehem ratzon Hashem, because they are the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. K'mei chukim. Okay, the first most basic statement the Rebbe says, which is a statement said by everybody in all sorts of books, Chassidus, Machshavas Yisrael, Musar, everybody says the same thing. And it's true. I mean, everybody says because it's true. And what do they say? That the reason that you don't steal isn't because it makes sense not to steal. The reason you don't steal is because God said don't steal. Because if you, and everybody will explain it as follows, and it's actually reasonable. If I don't steal because it makes sense for me not to steal, I will figure out in some situation that this situation allows for theft. It's reasonable to steal. I grew up being told that Robin Hood was a good guy. Robin Hood's stam a ganef. Right? No, he's a ganef, right? Oh, he's stealing from the right guys. He's stealing from the bad people, so he's a good guy. He's not a good guy, he's a ganef. Right? Is it mutter to steal from a thief? Show me where it's mutter to steal from a thief. Right? Okay. Now, if it's my thing, then there's interesting, the Gemara we're going to be learning in the next couple of days is about, are you allowed to take the law into your own hands relative to certain things? Fascinating Gemara. I still get next few lines. But that's relative to what belongs to me. Right? You took something from me. Am I allowed to go take it back? Yes, there's situations where I'm allowed to go take it back. I don't have to go to beis. I'm allowed to go take it back from you. Right? Good idea? Maybe not. Well, it depends who the guy's is. If the guy's name is Giuseppe, probably a bad idea, right? Don't go. Giuseppe took it, just, say Kaddish on it and say, okay, that's that, right?
It's going to break your legs.
Exactly, right? There's certain people who it's not worth getting involved in for a watch. Okay, fine, or a car. But there are certain situations where you are allowed to go get it back. But interesting, for the Gemara, we're about to learn the Gemara. In our Gemara class, what's the Gemara going to say? Don't sneak into his house. Why not? Even though you're allowed to go in there and take the thing. Don't sneak in like a ganef, because what might he think you are? A ganef talking, might not know it's you, and what might he do?
Kill you.
Might hurt you, kill you, right? I mean, a ganef just came into his house, so don't do it that way. Walk in, hi, Jim, I'm here to take back that thing you stole from me, you creep. Right? No problem. He's not going to kill you. I mean, maybe he will, maybe he won't, but at least you have a fighting chance. Right? Okay? That you might very well be able to do. Okay, but some go around stealing things because you think people are not proper people. Well, that's sort of a problem. Active theft. We're not going to discuss this, but there's no question that Jews over the ages living under despotic regimes did their best not to pay taxes to those regimes. That's a completely different act. I'm not saying right, wrong. That's how we acted, right? Okay. right? But not paying something is very different than going and taking it. Right? Very different. Right? But Jews were very good at not paying taxes. Now, everybody was trying not to pay taxes to those people, but Jews were particularly good. Right? Now, those people weren't very nice to us, generally. And actually, interesting enough, in Poland, certainly, where most things were local, there was a local paritz, and he was in charge of that land. And if he was a nice guy, everybody paid their taxes, no problem whatsoever. Right? It was the despots that were killing the Jews, etc., that people were doing their best not to pay. But the guys who were very helpful, everybody paid. So now, what does the Rebbe mean? The Rebbe is going to explain this in a much deeper way than is usually explained. Usually we will say simply what we said now. The reason not to steal is because God said don't. And that will ultimately result in me doing that more seriously than if it's simply not stealing because it makes sense for me not to steal. Because again, I will always find some situation where it might make sense to steal. Right? Okay. All those regimes who have laws on the books that say you're not allowed to murder, but the many of them are still murderous. There's a law in the book in Soviet Russia against murder. Okay. How many people did Stalin murder in the Gulag? Somewhere between 20 and 60 million of his own citizens. Somewhere in there. The common number is 20. The higher number, some of their Solzhenitsyn writes that there was probably 60. Okay, whatever it is. They argue about a few people, 40 million, right? Killed millions and millions and millions of people. Right? And yet, Rav Nanas tells an amazing story. Lezer Nanas, who was in the camps for 20 years, the ones he was walking. It's a long story. I don't want to get into the whole story, but just part of it is so fascinating because of the law and the non-law at the same time. They wanted to kill him. They wanted a pretext to kill him. And so they sent him, Shabbos, he was put in solitary confinement because he wouldn't work on Shabbos. So finally they gave up and they just put him in a cell, either with the most hardened criminals or in a cell by himself that he couldn't sit, he couldn't lay down in and couldn't stand up in. He'd crouch in that cell for 25 hours. But one day they took him out and said, come for a walk. It's a beautiful minus 10 degrees out. Let's go for a walk. And so there was a soldier behind him, making sure he didn't escape. They walked near the edge of the camp, past one of the factories, right? These camps were where most of the Russian economy was happening. There were 250, 300,000 inmates in a camp, and it was full of factories, like a city. It was full of factories, and that's where all the manufacturing was happening, etc. The Russian economy, the Soviet economy. So they walked near the edge, and someone was standing outside of the factory, this was Shabbos afternoon, and yelled, Subota, get down. It was called Subota, which is Shabbos in Russian. Right? Subota, get down. So he jumped down, and a bullet flew over him. Guy tried to kill him. Oh, gunshot. All of a sudden, soldiers show up from everywhere. Oh, my, you're not allowed to shoot guns. There's a law. You're not allowed to shoot guns. Well, I understand. There's a law you're allowed to kill people. No, there's no law. You're not allowed to kill people. So they had, after they tried to kill him by shooting him in the back because they wanted a pretext that he was trying to run away. That's why they were at the edge of the camp. He was trying to leave the camp, and I shot him so he wouldn't run away. So that failed. So then a whole legal proceeding took place relative to him and the soldier and what he was doing. They had to stand in front of the commandant and go through a whole legal procedure. What legal procedure? They were going to shoot him in the back and kill him. No, those two things exist simultaneously. Because when it has nothing to do with God, they can exist simultaneously. I mean, it's all arbitrary. I'll do whatever I want. Okay. So there's that aspect of mishpatim and edus. And everybody says that. The Inyan Zeh, but now the Rebbe says something very, very amazing about this. The Inyan Zeh, shegam mitzvahs, sheyesh aleim tam, even those mitzvahs that have a reason, tzarich l'kaima mipnei Hashem ratzon Hashem, a person has to fulfill that mitzvah because it's the will of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So the way we've explained it up until now, that's all mitzad me. I have to do it that way in order to make sure that I do it properly. I have to understand, I have to relate to it as the ratzon of a Kadosh Baruch Hu in order that I fulfill the mitzvah properly, because if I only understand it in terms of intellect, I might figure out a way Human intellect is very, very creative, and I might figure out a way that in this particular situation, I don't have to do it. Right? Okay. But the Rebbe says that's huloirak mitzad ha'adam ha'makayim. It's not only in terms of the person fulfilling the mitzvah, that I have to look at it as if it's all ratzon and there's no intellect. And what would that mean? Shekiyam ha'mitzvahs shaloi sarech liyos b'derech avedus ha'eved, that my performance of mitzvahs has to be, this is explaining how it's all relative to me, right? How the performance of mitzvah shalait tzarech liyos has to be b'derech avedus ha'eved, has to be in a fashion of the service of a servant. Shezeu dafka, and when is that? Zeu dafka kishemekayim es mitzvahs. That's when a person performs the mitzvahs loy mitzad hatam v'seichel, not because of the reason, ki im mitzad hatzivu yadin, because of the command of the master. Why doesn't he ever do what an ever does? Because he was told by his other to do it. He understands, he doesn't understand. It's irrelevant, it doesn't matter. The master says jump, the Eved jumps. That's what an Eved is. So that's our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So now that's mitzad me. I have to be an Eved. So I have to relate to those mitzvahs, even those mitzvahs that do resonate in Seichel. I have to relate to those mitzvahs as the command of my master. Okay, but that's all mitzad me. Again, not mitzad me in a selfish way, just in terms of how I'm relating to this act. But the mitzvah is an intellectual mitzvah. I just have to relate to it in a different way. I was saying, no, that's not true. Elegam, now the next three words say it all. Elegam mitzvah mitzvahs. Also, in terms of the mitzvah itself, a person has to understand what a mitzvah is. Meaning, I might say the mishpat is an intellectual mitzvah, but I'm supposed to relate to it in a way that's not intellectual. No. There's an aspect beyond intellect also in the mishpat. Elegam mitzvah mitzvahs. Ki kol mitzvahs, all mitzvahs. Gama mitzvah sheyesh aleim tam. Even those mitzvahs that have a reason. Hem ritzeni yisbarach. They are also the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every mitzvah is the ratzon of the Eibishter and the chokhmah of the Eibishter. The ratzon and the chokhmah. Sometimes the chokhmah is revealed to you and I. That's called a mishpat. Sometimes the chokhmah is not revealed to you and I. That's called a chayk. Does a chayk have chokhmah? Absolutely. Just not on a level that human intellect can understand. Can godly intellect understand the reason for a chayk? Absolutely. Can I? No. We'll talk about that in a minute. But every mitzvah is not only the chokhmah of the Eibishter, but it's also the ratzon of the Eibishter. And what's the nature of ratzon? By definition, we just talked about it. Ratzon shelamayla miyatam. Ratzon is something beyond intellect. Now, sometimes, very often, ratzon resonates in intellect. Meaning, I'm aware of why I might want this. Why did Tzvi want that hot rugula? Taste good, right? Tastes good. Why does it taste good? I don't know. It just does. Why does it give Tzvi pleasure? It gives us all pleasure. I'm just picking on Tzvi because he was the one eating the rugula, right? So I mean, he can be our living example, right? Okay, right? Why does Tzvi get pleasure, and all of us do? Most of us. If you don't, so okay, that's either good or bad. I don't know, right? Why do we get pleasure from eating a rugula? I don't know. I have no idea why a rugula tastes good to me and dirt doesn't. Right? I don't know. But I know I get pleasure from a rugula and I don't get pleasure from eating dirt. Chocolate pudding. You have to teach your kid to like the taste of chocolate pudding. Sit down with your little 2.5-year-olds. Okay, the junior. We're gonna enter into a new state of reality now. I'm going to give you some pudding. Now, you see what's in here? This is called chocolate pudding. I want to explain to you how good this is. It's very good. I don't have to do that. I give the kid chocolate pudding, and his eyes open up. First time he ever tasted it, his eyes open up like this. He goes, whoa, 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 what's that? And he starts drooling out the side of his mouth. Chocolate drool all over the place. So make sure he's wearing a bib, right? You'll experience the pleasure of giving your kid chocolate pudding for the first time. Right? Okay, don't let him take it himself. It'll end up all over the place. Just feed it at first. Right? Okay. This Shabbos, I had the pleasure of sitting next to a little guy named after my father, actually. His name was Shleimela. His father, it's actually, my father was Shlomo ben Nachum Alevi, so his father is Nachum, so it's Shlomo ben Nachum Alevi. So our son has two names, Nachum Levi, but Shlomo ben Nachum Alevi. So Shlomo was sitting next to me. He's about 2.5. He was eating his chocolate pudding Shabbos morning. Mamish in there with the spoon, and the thing. There's that little indented part at the bottom of those plastics. He's got his spoon in there trying. And he's 2.5. He's not so dexterous. He's like trying to figure out how to get the spoon in there. Not a drop spilled. Wow. Why does he get such pleasure from this? I don't know. Well, it gives me pleasure. And you might actually get more pleasure from vanilla pudding than chocolate pudding. You don't have to go to a psychologist for that. It's okay. I mean, it's weird, but I mean, okay, say that. There's people who have vanilla ice cream instead of chocolate ice cream. Say that, we put up with them. We don't shoot those people. Right? Better, maybe be some shiur talk of those people who just die by themselves or something. But, right? So, right? Are there people like vanilla more than chocolate? Yes. Why? Are you going to have kids that when you put peas and corn on the plate, one of them's going to take the peas and put every single one of them on the floor before he then eats the corn, and the other one's going to take all the corn and put it on the floor before he eats the peas? Is that going to happen? Yes.
It's like Seinfeld, the Seinfeld episode where Jerry's dating a girl who.
Wait, Svi, do we have to put up with this? Come on, no, let's not go there, okay? Let's not go to Seinfeld. He's Jewish, Baruch Hashem, but let's not go there. Okay? But that's an example of, the only person I do this is Dr. November, because he's Dr. November. I mean, what am I going to do? He's more older than me, and he can talk about the Mets or Mr. Ed whenever he wants.
Sounds good.
But pleasure is something that we don't understand. I don't understand why. Okay, so why did God say don't steal? I don't know. I can explain, P human intellect, why it is that it makes sense not to steal. But is my explanation is based on human intellect the same explanation that a Kadosh Baruch Hu would give me if he explained to me why I shouldn't steal? That's an unreasonable statement, the one I just made, right? Does the 3-year-old understand why it is he can't have a second pudding the same way the parents understand why he can't have a second pudding? Right? The parents say you can't have a second pudding. Okay, so the kid, maybe he comes to some understanding as to why he can't have a second pudding. Is his understanding going to be the same as his parents' understanding why he shouldn't have a second pudding? No, their understanding is going to be much more sophisticated. And it won't just be with it's not such a good idea to eat so much sugar and all that. There'll be all sorts of other stuff involved in their decision that one pudding is enough. They want him to grow up to be a certain type of person who understands that relating to Gashmias in moderation is the way to relate to Gashmias, and you don't have to have 3 puddings, you can have 1, and that's just fine, etc. All sorts of things going into their decision to not let him have the second pudding. Now, he might, after he finishes throwing his temper tantrum, he might have some understanding, a 3-year-old, I don't know, but let's say he's a really smart 3-year-old. So he'll have some understanding as to why the parents did, well, this with our 9-year-old, Moti. Moti is lactose intolerant, so I buy Moti those soy puddings, Alternativa it's called, right? In Tanuva, the non-milchik pudding. So whenever they come for Shabbos, I buy Moti a couple, right? So I bought him 2. I asked him Shabbos morning, he's always the first one up. I walked downstairs, there was Moti. I said, Moti, did you have your madan, your pudding? He said, yeah. I said, I bought 2. He said, he's 9 years old. He said, I know, but my parents only let me eat 1. Okay. Call it a Mati. Well done. I mean, his Zaidi just said, there's 2. He could always tell his parents. Well, Zaidi said I should have the other one, right? You could say that, right? And they'd go, okay. And then they'd, stop coming for Shabbos or something. Right? True? That could happen. Now, does he understand why he doesn't have the second one the same way they do? No, he's 9 and they're adults. Right? Though he has some understanding of it. Okay. So do you and I with the Eibishter and his mitzvahs. You and I understand why it is we don't steal? Haven't got a clue. I understand, P human intellect, why it's reasonable not to steal. That's why godly intellect says not to steal. Infinite intellect has the same understanding of not stealing as finite human intellect. I doubt it. That's a fairly unreasonable position that intellect itself can appreciate. Right? Okay, so then why don't we steal? Because it makes sense? No. Because it's the Ratzon of the Eibishter, not me, just mitzad me relating to it that way because I'll do it better, but because of the nature of the thing itself. The mitzvah itself is coming from a place beyond my intellect. Even the intellect of the mitzvah is coming from beyond my intellect, not just the Ratzon of it. Oh, that's a completely different relationship to mitzvahs. Let's see. So there's the level in which it's the Ratzon, Shelamayla mitam, third line. V'rak shekach gazar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's only because the Kadosh Baruch Hu decreed shaharatzon the mitzvahs elu, that the will of these mitzvahs, which we call mishpatim, yislavish, will be clothed gam betam, will also be clothed in reason. But what's the true source of the mitzvah? The Ratzon of Kadosh Baruch Hu. He wants me to do this. Sometimes the Eibishter allows for that will to descend down in the realm of intellect to a place where human intellect will understand it. Sometimes not. Let's read a couple of lines, then we'll talk about it, and then we'll stop. V'lo, not only that, ela shegam tamei mitzvahs, even the reasons of mitzvahs, kameshem lamitasam, as they are in truth. This is what we were talking about before. Heim lamaila, they're beyond mi'avona the seichel enoshi. They're beyond the understanding of human intellect. Damitis tamei mitzvahs, the true tam of the mitzvah, who kameshem b'chachmasa yisbar, is as those that reason exists in Hakadosh Baruch Hu's wisdom. Mikev and shigam chachmasa hu ein sof, and just as his wisdom is infinite. Ubefrat, particularly, shu yizbarach v'chochmasa echad. We'll leave that parenthetical statement alone for today. We'll talk about it tomorrow, perhaps, because we'll have time. Particularly because we'll talk about it today. If at the end we finish with time. Befrat shu yizbarach v'chochmasa echad. God's wisdom is one with His being. God is echad, essentially. Hare ein shayach. It's not relevant. That limited human intellect, yuchal lahasig, is able to comprehend amitis hatam, the true reason, the mitzvahs, of the mitzvahs. So how does it work? The Ratzon of the Eibishter, and this is how it works in you, and so this is how it works in the Eibishter. I mean, this is how it works in the Eibishter, that's why it works this way in you. You're created in his image, and you can understand things about him by understanding things about yourself, and that's why he created us in his image, so we can appreciate things about him, because we experience the same things, right? Your Ratzon, your superconscious Ratzon, comes down and will be clothed in will. Sometimes you can explain why it is that you want something, right? Now, the ultimate reason I can't get to, okay, beside it, but in terms of basic human reality, I can explain why I want certain things. It's a very, very hot day. I've been outside for the last 2 hours, working hard or walking or doing whatever I've been doing outside, and I come in and I'm schwitzing, and what do I probably want to do? The first thing that I walk into the house is a nice cold drink. I'd like to drink something nice and cold. Is that a reasonable desire? Absolutely. Can you explain rationally why I want that? Yes, no question. Can you, now, why exactly that gives me as much pleasure as it gives me the cold water when I'm hot? Okay, I don't understand that whole system. Okay, but that's the way it works, and I don't want to get into all that. Is it a reasonable thing to want a cup of water right now? Absolutely. Right? Okay. There might be a will that I have that's doesn't resonate in intellect. That you and I will call a taiva. I'll have some sort of, right, taiva, we know what taiva is, right?
Yeah, sure.
The difference in Chassidus between a Ratzon and a taiva is a Ratzon can be explained rationally and a taiva can't. What if I have a taiva? What's an example of the same situation with a taiva? I walk in, schwitzing, I say, and I'm going to use the word taiva because that's what I would say, because it's an unreasonable thing to want at this particular moment. Oh, I have a taiva for a hot cup of tea. So look at me, I'm all schwitzing, and it's 90 degrees outside. So what's wrong? What do you mean? I said, I don't know. The last 10 minutes I've been walking. I just have this taiva for a cup of tea. I can't explain it. I've been looking forward to a hot cup of tea. That we'll call it taiva. Why? It doesn't make any sense. What does make sense? A cold drink. A cold drink makes perfect sense. Right? If you're English, a cold Guinness. Right? Oh, it's acting Irish, I think, right? But whatever. Okay, say that. You should probably boycott. Right? A cold drink. It's too strong for us North Americans anyway. A cold drink. I'd love a cold drink. Makes perfect sense. Why? Because sometimes Ratzon resonates in intellect very clearly, and I can explain my Ratzon. I know exactly why I want it. I'm cold. What do I probably want? A sweater? Perfectly reasonable thing to want. I'm cold, or a blanket, whatever. Or I want to turn up the heat. Well, they're perfectly reasonable desires. Right? They resonate in Seichel. No problem. And then there's other desires that you might have, but won't resonate in Seichel. A hot cup of tea that you had a taiva for, or you come in on a freezing day, right? It's winter now, and it's not so freezing in Yerushalayim, right? But it's some freezing New York, Toronto day, and you come in from the car, and you had to park the car 2 blocks away because there was no parking, so you came in and you're frozen solid. You have a taiva for some ice cream. So that's a taiva. Ice cream. Hot chocolate I get. Ice cream? Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like ice cream. Chocolate ice cream. Right? Butterscotch Ripple ice cream. I don't know. Ice cream's good. Tastes good. You had a taiva for ice cream. Can I explain that taiva? Well, okay. I understand that ice cream tastes good, but this is like a funny time to want ice cream. Hot chocolate I get. Okay. But so sometimes Ratzon will express itself in intellect, and sometimes not. Relative to the Eibishter, same thing. Certain aspects of the Eibishter's will have descended in. First, every aspect of his will also expresses itself in his chokhmah, his wisdom, his intellect. Sometimes that intellect descends down to such a point that you and I can also understand that idea in our own way. So the chokhmah of the Eibishter has descended down all the way into this physical world so that it expresses itself in the context that a human being, and every human being, you don't have to be Jewish to understand this, every human being will understand that this is a perfectly reasonable way to act. Don't murder, don't steal, certain things like that. Right? Okay. Adultery, perfectly reasonable thing, not so good for marriages. Adultery, okay, probably a bad idea. Right? Okay. Reasonable things to put on the books. Okay. Fine. What does that mean? That means that the chokhmah, which is really here, is descended down all the way to here. What about levels of chokhmah in the Eibishter that haven't descended all the way down? You and I call those chukim. Is there chokhmah? There is chokhmah. It just hasn't descended all the way down into physical reality. What's a beautiful example of it that I once heard from a mashpia? Shatnez. Shatnez, you and I call a chayk. Is there a spiritual intellect to shatnez? Absolutely. Is there a physical intellect to shatnez? No. You can't figure out in a laboratory why these two things don't go well together. Spiritually, can you figure out why they don't go well together? Well, there's a hint to it all. One of the early stories in the Torah, there was a guy named Cain and a guy named Hevel. What did they do before Cain killed Hevel, before there wasn't a they anymore? What did they do? They did one thing that we know about.
Didn't they give offerings?
Yeah, they brought offerings. Okay, what did Hevel bring?
One brought like
Sheep.
choice.
He brought a sheep. What did Cain bring?
Flax.
What?
Flax.
Flax. What does flax make?
Women.
What does sheep make?
Wool.
Didn't work out so well, did it? Ooh, that's interesting. Now, does that resonate in Gashmias, in physical reality? No. Is there a spiritual level in which we see very, very clearly that wool and linen don't necessarily work together in a very positive way? Yes. Can I explain that in Gashmias? No. Meaning I can't figure that out in a laboratory. But LP spirituality, has that chokhmah descended down into at least Eilam Abriya or Eilam Yitzira, Zeis Chukas, right? It's up there in Atzilus. I can't go there. Might it descend down to one of the worlds where I can have some spiritual appreciation of it? Yes. So Shlomo Melech said he understood all of the chukim except one, Paraduma. That he couldn't. He tried, and Le'ola B'yadi. I didn't manage. Who did understand Paraduma? Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, the chokhmah of Paraduma, exists in a world called Eilam Atzilus, and that's where the conscious reality of Moshe Rabbeinu lives. And so Moshe Rabbeinu is living who appreciates chokhmah Atzilus, the wisdom in Eilam Atzilus, can figure out, can understand Paraduma. Can anybody else? No. No one else has ever figured that out. Why? Well, because they just don't live there. They don't live where that in the place where that makes sense. So you and I don't live in a place where wool and linen makes sense. But we're aware of the fact that there could be a place where wool and linen not going together spiritually does make sense, right? One expresses chesed, one is gvura. They can only be together in certain ways. There are times when wool and linen are mutter, right? You can put linen tzitzis on your wool beged. We don't, but you could. The Kohanim wore shatnez, right? Okay, in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. There's 8 billion people who can walk around wearing shatnez and it's not an issue, right? So there are times when you're in such an elevated state where it's not a problem. There are times when you're just, a normal everyday person. You're not one of those creatures called a Jew, right? So for you, the shatnez isn't an issue. Okay.
Kohanim wore shatnez. Didn't they wear different garments that some of them were wool and some of them were linen? It was actually interwoven together.
There were times when they wore shatnez. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, there were worse things happening in the Beis Hamikdash, like shechita on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Over malachas and Yisurei Misa were happening in the Beis Hamikdash all the time. Not like someone shechs an animal outside the Beis Hamikdash, it's chayv misa, right? Kayan shechs an animal in the Beis Hamikdash, just did a huge mitzvah. It's called the korban oila. In the morning, Shabbos morning, he's going to do another one. It's called a musaf. And one isn't enough. On Shabbos, let's shech 2. Let's get another one. It's Shabbos. Let's do an Issa Deraisa more. It's not an Issa Deraisa. It's a mitzvah. Right? And even you and I, in certain situations, right? I remember the first time I had to get into a jeep with a gun on Shabbos in the army. It was a rather strange experience. It's a mitzvah. What are you going to do? Right? And what's really interesting, you can't carry the gun unless you have your machzanit in it. Because if your machzanit is out of it,
then you can't really do it.
It's not a gun. So now it's muktzah. Right? But if your machzanit is in it, so it's a gun. So then it's pikuach nefesh. Right? That's interesting. Intuitively, we would think the other way around, right? It's less of a problem if it doesn't, it's not, no, but that's the way. If it's not a gun, you're not allowed to carry it. It's muktzah. If it is a gun, you are allowed to carry it because it's pikuach nefesh and you're a soldier and it's Shabbos. You will see people with, people who bring a gun to shul on Shabbos, they won't have the machzanit in, and there's a heter for that simply because of the pikuach nefesh of having it in, and it might chas v'shalom shoot someone by mistake in shul. Right? So you will see sometimes people without the machzanit in the gun in shul on a Shabbos in this country, right? Simply because you don't want to shoot people by accident, which is also pikuach nefesh. But as a soldier, you don't have that issue.
But you have to carry it on your way to shul with the machzanit.
That could very well be. I'm not sure. I've never looked into the halacha because I don't carry a gun on Shabbos and shoot the shul. But there's, usually someone in our shul who does have a gun. Okay. So there's all sorts of interesting halachas, right? And how does it all work? Whatever the ratzon of the Eibishter is. If the ratzon of the Eibishter is, he wants you to shecht an animal on Shabbos, so then you shecht an animal on Shabbos. Who does he want to do that? A kohen in the Beis Hamikdash. Anybody else? Nope. No one. And if someone else does it, there's a few million people that if the one of them does it, it's a chiyuv misa. There's another 8 billion people that if they do it, innocuous. I'm not going to shecht it, but if they will do it, okay. Let's just finish with a period. Right? There's a period in 2 lines. Right? I'm 7 lines down. 8 lines down. The reasons of mitzvahs were not revealed ultimately. The true reasons of mitzvahs are beyond our human intellect and human understanding. V'gam beis makemen, and even if in a particular place, shenizgala, that it is revealed, v'nisparish and explained, ezetam, a particular reason, hamuvan lanu, that's understood to us, l'cha'ora, at first glance, hine tam zeh, this reason, hamuvan lanu, that's understood to us, in a tachlis atam, isn't the ultimate reason for the mitzvah. It's a level of reason that you and I will understand, like a parent will explain to a child something that will resonate in the intellect of the child, but that's certainly not the true depth of the intellect of the parent. Okay, and here you're talking about finite intellect of parent and finite intellect of child, but you're talking about the infinite intellect of the Eibishter and our finite intellect, so obviously the distance is quite great. So there are mitzvahs that you and I call mishpatim. What does that mean? That means a level that's completely beyond intellect has come down and resonates in intellect. But in essence, it's still a level completely beyond intellect. That's a completely new understanding of what a mishpat is. Now, who can't possibly deal with this? The Greek. So this is the second level. This is what the Greek really bothers the Greek. Okay. Now, one other idea that just is an important idea about mishpatim. Right? People would generally say the reason it's called a mishpat is because human intellect understands it. No. Human intellect understands it because God called it a mishpat in the Torah. Right? That's a completely different statement. What comes first, the Torah or our intellect? The Torah. God, so to speak, looks in the Torah and creates the world. So it says, that means the fact that stealing is called a mishpat in the Torah, that's the reason that humans intuitively understand that stealing is a bad thing. If the Eibishter called kashrus a mishpat in the Torah, you and I would intuitively understand why milk and meat doesn't go together. Because the source of it is the Torah, not our intellect. That God's responding to our intellect. He created our intellect. Our intellect works in line with how the Torah defines reality. And the Torah defines that thing as a mishpat. Therefore, human intellect understands it intuitively. And if the Eibishter would define it as something else, if the Eibishter decided that murder is a chayk, human beings would not intuitively understand that murder is a bad thing. Now, it's hard for us to appreciate what would that look like? How does that work? I don't know. Go to the south side of Chicago.
Is it possible that murder is a chok, but we're so accustomed to murder being a bad thing because it's so ingrained in our society that now we see it in an intellectual way?
Chazal call it a mishpat, the Torah calls it a mishpat, it's called a mishpat in the Torah.
Okay.
So. But it is interesting that relative to that, and since it's so ingrained in us, Baruch Hashem, right? And this is the case in the vast majority of human beings in the world, right? Even Muslims, right? It's probably only 10-15% of Muslims who think murder is a great idea. Well, okay, but that's 250 million people, right? So you have a problem with those 250 million people. The other ones don't seem to be so against it like they should be, but okay. But your average person, Baruch Hashem, does not think murder is a good idea, and therefore, and like you said, that's so ingrained in the way we're brought up. So then, every single person in this room is basically a tzaddik relative to the aveira of murder. Meaning you don't have a taiva to murder. Right? Tzaddik Beinoni Rasha. So some people think it's these, there's people who are tzaddikim, there's people who are Beinonim, and there's people who are Roshaim. No. Everybody has certain things about which they're a tzaddik, other things they might be a Beinoni. Unfortunately, most of us other things that we might be something else. Right? A Beinoni doesn't have the third one. What you will call a Beinoni doesn't have the third one. Right? A tzaddik doesn't even have the second one. Okay, but every single person, Rabbi says this explicitly, is a tzibur shalem, a tzibur, tzadi beis reish, tzadik Beinoni Rasha.
Wow.
Right? Relative to every single person in this room has a mitzvah that you have, or an aveira, you have no taiva for whatsoever. Murder. And if you do have a taiva for murder and it's 50-50, whether or not you murder someone who angers you, please let us know so we'll take the necessary precautions because so that would make us a little nervous. Right? Someone cuts you off on the highway. Oh, I want to kill him. No, it's us, sir. I can't kill him. No, you don't think that way. Right? You really don't think that way. Right? Okay. To appreciate what a tzaddik is all about, a tzaddik is exactly the same way you are relative to murder to every single halacha in Shulchan Aruch. It's just completely and totally not shaykh that it will ever happen.
Crazy to think about.
Yeah, right? Because you can appreciate that relative to murder. Right? He has a taiva to murder. You don't, in other words, you don't have a yetzer hara to murder. You don't have, it's such that yetzer hara will then ascend to your conscious reality and you'll go, no, and push it away. You're not a Beinoni relative to murder. You don't even entertain the thought subconsciously. Why? Because you've been educated in a certain way. That's just not part of the reality. Okay, Baruch Hashem. You grew up in a relatively healthy culture that thinks murder is just completely off the pale. What is this? Out of the pale, whatever. It's not part of reality. Okay. There are cultures where it is. That culture that I mentioned, that people live just not so far away from here. Murder is part of the free will reality. Most people choose not to, but it's out there as a choice. That's not a very healthy culture. Not really easy to respect that culture. Hate them? Hate them. Respect them? Not in the least. Don't respect them.
Murder is praised.
Among some people, it's praised. But just in general, in the society as a whole, it's part of the free will and reality. In the society we grew up in, murder is not part of the free will reality. You were educated not to have. You don't want free will to do things like that, right? Free will isn't, people get all mixed up, what's free will? Free will is 50-50. You don't want 50-50 to murder. Then you're a lowlife. You're a murderer. You don't want 50-50 to steal. God gave us this thing called free will, which we are trying to ultimately diminish and do away with completely, so we will have no free will to do anything against the will of God. Then we're a completely realized person. Don't want to activate free will relative to evil. We just naturally have the theoretical possibility to involve ourselves in evil. What kind of evil? Well, if we're educated like a normal, healthy human being, murder is not one of them. Theft?
Yeah.
That's a harder one, right? Maybe, like cutting a few ethical corners here, there. That's harder. Murder? Idol worship? Like real idol worship. I don't mean, like cell phones. Oh, that's idol worship. No, it's not idol worship. Real idol worship. Have a taiva? No, it said, the Gemara says, God took that taiva out of the world. You read Tanakh, what's with these people, with their idols? What is their hang up?
Crazy stuff.
Right? Oh, because they had spiritual taivas like you have physical taivas. They look at you and see you eating your, I'm not picking on you to speak, but if see us eating, I'm going to say ice cream, I'm not saying ragala. Seeing us eating our ice cream, those guys in Tanakh see us eating their ice cream and go, what is with those people? Why are they so into Gashmians? Don't they know there's a God? Right?
Crazy.
Right? We look at them and go, what is with those people? Why are they so into Avodah Zarah? Because their taivas were Avodah Zarah, and our taivas are chocolate pudding, right? Or worse, right? They can't figure out our. It's like, what's with these people? They look at us from up there. Right? Just learned the Gemara in Sanhedrin where I don't remember who it is that said it. A famous Avid of Avodah Zarah from Tanakh. I remember having a conversation with one of the Rabbanim. His neshama.
Is it Absalom?
Might be Avshalom, I don't remember. It says that if you were there, you would be running after that Avodah Zarah as fast as you could. Meaning, if you understood the taivas that we had for that Avodah Zarah, you would be. But the Eibusher took that taiva away. So relative to that, most of us can probably be considered tzaddikim. I don't understand. You really want to go rub the belly of that guy who sits there with the big belly? Like that's this taiva to do that? No. There are certain things you have to be careful of. We were talking about the Olympics the other day. I've been wondering, for some strange reason, every time anybody sends me anything on YouTube to look, before I see it, there's an advertisement for Tai Chi. Every single thing is
The AI
Tai Chi.
generated ones.
I don't understand what's going on with Tai Chi. Like it's 7 minutes every morning. I mean, I didn't know what it says, right? And then you have to wait until you can skip, right? So every time
YouTube's testing its algorithm on you and wants to understand what you enjoy.
Tai Chi. So now, is Tai Chi by definition of it? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I've been wondering because I've been seeing. I asked my wife, when you look on YouTube, what do you Tai Chi? Right?
I don't know if I would classify it as I'm not.
You're not a Rav. That's why I'm not going to ask you, right? So is Tai Chi Avodah Zarah or not? I don't know. Interesting question. I'm not sure. I don't know. I wouldn't ask in that one.
I don't think it
Right?
involves
You don't know enough, right? These are serious questions because you're talking about Inisa Deraisa, right? This is like serious stuff. I don't. If I never learned Hilchos Shabbos backwards and forwards, I'm not going to start asking very subtle laws in Hilchos Shabbos because it's life and death. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, right? Meaning, it's true, it seems, you're doing the exercises, you're not doing anything else. Do the exercises to the guy who told you to do the exercises mean something in spirituality and Avodah Zarah? They might. I don't know.
How is yoga classified?
I don't know. I don't think yoga is a problem. I don't
It is if you chant before.
Oh yeah? The chanting's
But the chanting is chanting to gods.
deities, different deities. So I, I've been, because since I